All right, let's go. All right, there's so much to talk about. Welcome to the Frankly Fabulous Experience. We're in a different world suddenly, to some degree. I mean, we're back in 2020, maybe. Did we ever leave? I mean, it's one of those things. I feel like we're still in 2020. It's about to be 2022. But this year, I mean, it's amazing we've gotten away with what we've gotten away with this year. More or less since, I'd say, April or May, things have been returning to normal, back to normal. People going out, people going to restaurants, people traveling. Hot vac summer. Well, it was one of those things, kind of. And now, well, the Omicron thing, right? That's the big fucking... And it plays into my own personal life in a lot of complicated ways. I mean, So my brother was just here to visit, but also sort of retrieve me. And, well, to give me a ride back to Columbus for the holidays was the general idea. Which... the plan was they were gonna come here, stay for a couple days, and then we were all gonna go back together. I'd stay for a certain amount of time, not really sure, and then my dad and Susan would drive me back. Which, I wanted to have like sort of a New York Christmas. That was my initial idea. As absurd as that sounds now in this sort of pandemic terror sphere that we live in. My brother came from the 13th through the 16th. So if he would have driven me back, I would have been in Columbus for like at least 10 days just to be there for Christmas, which I didn't really want to do to begin with. So my dad and Susan agreed that they would maybe drive him back like the 21st or the 22nd. They would stay, maybe they'd stay through Christmas, and then they'd go back to Ohio, and we'd sort of have a Christmas here. I just feel like because I'm in this apartment, like, I just kind of I wanted to have a Christmas here while I can, I like New York on Christmas. One of the best Christmases of my life was 2011 Christmas when I was in New York. And I've been in Columbus every Christmas of my life. I mean, last year obviously sucked because of the pandemic, but we're sort of, at least in New York, it hasn't really hit in Columbus yet. It hasn't hit, but in New York it just exploded all of a sudden out of nowhere. Literally Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I mean, my brother and his girlfriend were here basically Tuesday and Wednesday. They drove in Monday night. We walked around all day Tuesday, all day Wednesday, and they left Thursday morning. And, we're walking around all day Tuesday and Wednesday like nothing, like it's Christmas shopping season. We're going to H&M. We went to multiple H&Ms. They were here on vacation. What they like to do, they like to go on vacation. They like to go out to eat. So we went to diners both days. And then we went to restaurants both evenings. So we were in a lot of places indoors in a way. I felt, I don't do that much myself. I don't really eat indoors, hardly ever, for this very reason. But to be honest, over the last week especially, I have kind of lightened up. I mean, I've been talking about it. I booked this gig for December 27th. It was going to be, my triumphant return to Brooklyn or whatever. And, bow, there goes that, right out of the fucking water. So we're walking around all day Tuesday and Wednesday, and we sort of noticed these lines. There's all these people waiting in line to get COVID tests, and I'm thinking, that's kind of weird. I haven't seen that really, and we're sort of like, well, what's the explanation? And Jack's girlfriend says, well, it's the holidays. People might need tests to travel, negative tests. I'm thinking, okay, that sounds reasonable. But it's also weird to me. I'm like, I distinctly remember walking by the City MD testing center over here on 9th Avenue of like a week ago or two, within the last couple weeks, and seeing it and just thinking like it was like some artifact of like the ancient pandemic history of 2020 or something. Like, it just looked abandoned. It looked like it was in disuse. We didn't need it anymore. It didn't even look like it was open. It literally looked like the lights were off and it was locked and everything. And so I thought, oh, the pandemic, not that it's over, but it didn't really seem like an immediate threat at all. It seemed like New York was safe because everybody gets the vaccine here. And it just hasn't really shown its head that much, like more or less since I'd say the spike last winter. Things have been sort of on the decline in a basically like a flat, low case count every day. And they've been on this reopening campaign hardcore. De Blasio, it's his last sort of thing as mayor, as he's trying to fucking, reopen everything. He doesn't want to close businesses again. It's easy to say that kind of shit when the threat isn't here. But when the threat shows up, then it's like, oh, okay. We need to take this seriously. We need to protect people, So, last Friday, for instance, was one of the first nights I really went out a little bit. I mean, I'll go to readings and stuff, but to be honest, basically the way I've lived my life since I got here was like, I don't put myself at risk that much. Even when I eat if I eat indoors, I try to be as quick about it as possible, and to be honest, it always kind of like lingers and scares me to the point where I'm like, oh my god, I bet I got sick. I bet I got sick when I sat in Schnippers for 5 minutes and ate my chicken fingers next to those, tourists, those grubby tourists across from the Port Authority, or like the person behind the counter coughed or something, like clearly, I got sick from, that's the way I've been, to be honest. I don't really go to bars full of people. I don't go to shows. I'll go to readings from time to time. But even that, like a lot of times I'll wear my mask. I've started to loosen up a little bit because it has felt like, okay, things have been sort of not an issue for long enough that it's like we're out of this to some degree, All steam ahead, full steam ahead. Even getting the booster didn't really seem like an imperative or anything. It just seemed like, we don't really need it. Like, COVID's not really a huge presence here. And so we're walking around, like I said, doing all this stuff, going to H&M. We were mostly outdoors. We weren't indoors that much. I was standing in an H&M for probably half an hour, 45 minutes while, Heather looked at stuff, or I got a shirt, or Jack and I were talking, I mean, we both had our masks on. I wear a double mask everywhere. But, like, in these diners and stuff we were going in, like, I wasn't really wearing a mask. We're eating. I mean, I don't do that stuff, typically, to be honest, that much. I eat outdoors almost exclusively. Maybe once every couple weeks I'll eat indoors in a place. And I try to be in and out. And like I said, I'm paranoid about it. I do try to be excessively careful about it for this very reason, And I read a fucking story recently about how some guy had the Omicron, and he tested positive for the Omicron, and he came to some anime convention. He was in New York for an anime convention. And I was sort of thinking, well, okay, we'll see how this plays out. Maybe, but I didn't hear anything else about it at all. I didn't hear anything about, like, oh, there's starting to be Omicron cases. And then all of a sudden we're walking around Tuesday and Wednesday, and we remarked on it. We're like, wow, what's with these lines? This is crazy. I haven't seen this before. And I'm looking at the people in line, and I'm thinking, are they sick? Like, what's going on here? And then Wednesday night, right before they're about to leave, I sort of get on the internet, Twitter. I kept seeing the same thing on Twitter. Oh my God, literally everybody in NYC has COVID. Literally everybody. And then TikTok. Oh my God, my entire For You page is people in New York City who have COVID. Every single person in New York City has COVID. I saw on Facebook this guy I know who's like a local rock luminary. He has COVID. He tested positive. So it's like those are kind of indications. Like, so I'm thinking this like exploded out of nowhere. Like literally Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, people were going about. I mean, even Thursday morning when we're driving around, we were trying to move Jack's car because of alternate side parking. And was that Thursday? Yeah, Thursday. People were pretty much going about their business as usual. The streets were packed with people. And then Thursday night, after they left, walking around, the vibe was like when Trump got elected. It was like panic. The streets were a little emptier, and there was kind of like a fear in the streets in a real weird way. There was just a weird vibe everywhere. And the last 2 days, I mean, it's Saturday now. I mean, yesterday I woke up and it was like stone quiet. Like, and it still is. It's still like pretty much just like completely still. I mean, to me, this is a good sign because New Yorkers do take it seriously, and it seems like people are. I mean, I went out last night to just walk around. I went to Trader Joe's yesterday, and I went to get something to eat last night. Maybe wasn't smart, but like I said, I double mask everywhere, and I did need food and stuff. Like, I'm gonna go back into lockdown mode, more or less. That's my plan. The way I was looking at it is like, well, for one thing, if, God forbid, one of us, either Jack, Heather, or I, caught fucking it while we were out and about this week, I wouldn't want to take it home to Ohio. Like, that's not good. Like, I don't think that we did, but, like, we don't know. It seems like this one manifests in a couple days. The narrative that everyone is saying is SantaCon. SantaCon causes COVID spike, which I don't think it's. I mean, I'm sure SantaCon had a lot to do with it, but like everybody was out at holiday parties and shit this weekend. It's like this is holiday season. Everybody's going to fucking like office parties. They're going to see shows. It's just like we're vaxxed. We're like. And to be honest, they don't know that much about the Omicron. They know it is vaccine evasive, but like they're not sure how much and this and that. And to like everything in the pandemic, it doesn't seem like it matters until it's like right in your fucking backyard. And then it's like, oh my God. Then you take it really seriously. Like, I'm sure in Ohio right now, they're just going about their business as usual because like it's not like this. Like, this was, like, kind of freaky. To notice it Tuesday and Wednesday and be like, there are all of these fucking people in line to get COVID tests. What is that about? I have not seen that. We talked about it, And so, for me, I do have a little bit of, like, I don't know what it is, but, like, I do have a little bit of, like, a like a throat thing or something right now. I feel fine. But, like, from what I understand, everybody kind of got sick, like, Monday, Tuesday. They woke up and have, like, kind of sort of, like, flu-like mild cold. It seems like it's pretty mild for most people who are vaccinated. So, I mean, I think it is startling. Today, I think, they said it was, like, the highest COVID count ever in New York City, which that's not good. But, to be fair, like, they said on the radio today, New York does have a 91% of adults have received at least one dose of the fucking vaccine. So, like, it isn't going to be like it was March 2020. Like, the vaccine does mitigate, to a large degree, the serious illness with this variant. Maybe not as much as the original But like it's definitely way 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 better. If you're fully vaccinated, you're almost certainly going to be fine. You'll either be asymptomatic or have a very mild thing, which most New Yorkers are. And I also think New Yorkers take it seriously, and they are going to voluntarily kind of tone it down. I mean, a lot of people will anyway. That's what I've noticed. There was way less people at the bar and out eating and things. Way more people doing outdoor dining. I mean, last night when I was walking around, things did look kind of normal in a lot of bars. Like, a lot of bars and restaurants seemed like they had a pretty good amount of people in them. But there were more people eating outside. I mean, the holidays complicates all of it. And to be honest, I do think that the best policy right now is to just, like, shut it down. Like, I know nobody wants to do that. Your families really want to see you. And, like, I want to see them too, you know. If there wasn't a pandemic, it wouldn't be nearly as complicated. But for me, personally, I have to think about travel arrangements. So if I get a ride home with my brother and his girlfriend, and I'm in Ohio, well, first of all, I didn't have time to pack or anything. You know, like, I wasn't even ready to go. But I'm going to be in Ohio. I'm not going to have any of my stuff. Where am I going to stay? I'm going to stay at my dad's house with 3 other people who live there. I can't control what they're going to do. They're going to come and go as they please. I'm not going to have a car. I didn't have any weed either, so it's like that's not going to be any fun. Or I could stay at Jack's house. Him and his girlfriend do whatever they want. They have people over. It's like I'm just going to be at the mercy of other people for what? Well, the other thing is, like, my original plan was to have my dad and his girlfriend drive me back. They're not. I don't want them coming to New York City right now when this is happening. Like, Susan got the vaccine, but they're older. My dad has not gotten the vaccine. Like, I hate to put that on blast. You know, but, like, he should just stay at home. You know, like, it's going to be just like last year. There's going to be a huge spike starting now into January because of this very reason, this holiday thing. This Omicron does spread very fast. And they're saying it's milder. They don't really know that for sure. They might just be saying that because a lot of people who are getting it have the fucking vaccine. Maybe that's why it seems milder. A lot of this stuff's anecdotal. You know, even the New York City caseloads. It's like not everybody has it. You know, to say literally everybody in New York City has COVID is a gross exaggeration. Like, 10,000 new cases is bad, but, like, there's 8 million people that live in this fucking city. That's like 0.1%. That's almost nothing. Like, I do think there's some value in trying to keep it in perspective rather than, like, being super afraid of this. Like, I mean, New Yorkers have a different experience of it, I think, than anywhere else in the world, actually. Like, it really did go off like a bomb here. And it was totally unsuspecting, you know? I mean, I could have left with my brother and his girlfriend yesterday. Would that have been the smart thing? Like, would that have been the safe thing? I think Ohio will probably be fine through the holidays. But, like, look, this Omicron thing just landed here. If one person from New York goes to Columbus, Ohio, within 2 or 3 weeks, it's going to explode there. Like, it could have already happened. I don't want to be the one who takes it there, for one thing. But the other thing is, like, I was just in Ohio for a year. This situation is, like, weirdly reminiscent of that exact March 13th or whatever when the fucking lockdown happened. Because I was in New York. I had a chance to get out. I got out at the last possible second. Literally one day everything was normal, and then boom, everything started to freak out, and I got out at the last possible second. That's basically what Thursday was. Thursday was like, here's your fucking last chance. I could have ridden home to Ohio with my brother and his girlfriend and just fucking... What would have likely happened is I would have been there through Christmas, at least. Probably my brother's birthday. So, 12 days. And now, I mean, they're going to cancel everything in New York, I imagine, for at least the next month. Like, I think this will go through in about a month. Probably by February, things will be sort of back chill again. Because they will mitigate it. People will voluntarily kind of lock down. They'll cancel things. Like, I know that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be chilling here and going on walks. And that is it. It's basically going to be like how I was, in 2020 at my mom's house. Like, return to quarantine conditions. Until, I'm going to get a booster. I got to get it ASAP. I want to load up on food and shit and make sure I'm, like, in here and ready. And then I'm going to, like... But, for one thing, I am here alone. I can control who I interact with, who I expose myself to, and vice versa. And so I think that's just for the good of everybody. Especially the people in Ohio are not going to want to cancel anything. Grandma is not going to want to cancel Christmas. Your family's going to want to see you. And it's hard. It's hard to just be like, sorry. I mean, if it was a normal year, I'd be there. But like I said, I literally just spent a year there. And I didn't know that's what was going to happen, right? When I drove from New York to Columbus with a suitcase full of my stuff, and that was it, I didn't realize I was going to be there for a year. Like I thought, who knows what I thought. But I don't want that to happen again. If I ride back with my brother and Heather to Columbus, Ohio, I'm in the exact same situation I was in March 15th, the Ides of March 2020, which is I'm crashing at somebody's house. I don't have any of my stuff at all. It's all in New York. And I'm trapped. It's at the mercy of somebody else. Like, for how long? I don't know. I'd be in Ohio for a month or something. Like, I'd have to probably rent a car to come back, because how else would I get back here? Like, the point is that just, like, people should not really be intermingling that much right now. I know it didn't seem that way a week ago. Like I said, last Friday I went to Pete's because I wanted to check out the venue I was supposed to play there, December 27th. This was supposed to be my New York Christmas. And I went out. I went out to hang up flyers. Who knows if they actually put them up? Fuck. I mean, when was that? Thursday I went up and hung up some flyers. I don't know what I was thinking. I just want people to see the flyers. I don't really, it's not really meant to be like this is going to happen. It's just like the flyer looks cool, so I want people to see it. What I'm going to start to do is just make little drawings and cartoons and little poems and shit and print those out and hang them up on poles instead of flyers. So not necessarily as promotional material, more as just like public art. I mean, downtown New York is completely an art gallery. Every street is an art gallery. Like, it's free space. It's free wall space with the, the elite creatives of the whole fucking world. If you want to look at it in a snobby way, an elitist way. So yeah, I mean, last Friday night I took the train into Brooklyn. I was at Pete's for. I mean, I hung out out back a lot of the time. Actually, I went out back to smoke. I didn't hang out really in the bar when there was no music on. You know, I wasn't hanging out in the bar area talking to people and shit. I watched a couple bands, but everything seemed fine. And then SantaCon was supposed to be the next day, or was the next day. And I was sort of not like I was not like looking forward to it, but like SantaCon is like unfortunately a notable fucking thing in the West Village. Like I do remember when my first year in New York, 2010, coming to the West Village and seeing all these people dressed as Santa Claus and being like, what the fuck? Why are all these douchebags taking over the West Village? And so, like, living near there, I was going to explore that a little bit on Saturday night. But instead, what ended up happening was I was texting with Nevin, who I was in Wavetable with. And so I ended up going out to his place in Bay Ridge to jam. And we played some music. So rather than going to SantaCon and going to all these bars and potentially exposing myself to all the people who had COVID on Monday, that's clearly what happened. This guy took it to this anime convention. It spreads fast, and it spreads to a lot of people, this new variant. They said each person that gets it transmits it to like 3 or 5 people or something. So, like, it's gonna spread exponentially. Oh yeah, Titanic. That's the other thing I want to talk about. I'm going to go in at length about Titanic. We watched Titanic. That was one of the things I did with my brother and his girlfriend. She wanted to watch Titanic. She put it on. It was the perfect choice. So here I am in my stateroom. I feel like I'm the captain of the Titanic who's elected to go down with the ship. Well, I could go home and be stranded again for X amount of time with none of my stuff. Well, the other thing was the sink here is backing up. I've been having this problem with my fucking sink, and I told them when they came, I was like, the sink in the bathroom backs up a little bit. Try not to use it that much if you don't have to. And so, of course, the first thing that fucking happens is, like, a bunch of water. And it doesn't drain, like, at all. It drains extremely slowly. Like, it took, like, 3 days to drain out of the fucking sink. And so, my brother's just kind of in this mode that's, like, kind of, like, trying to tell everybody what, what to do. And so he's like, you need to get that sink fixed. And so, like, I've got this sink backing up. There's certain things I have to deal with the apartment. Like, right before they left, somebody knocked on the door, and it's like, they had the wrong apartment, but, like, I don't know if there's people trying to get in to do maintenance and shit. Like, I can't just leave and, like, leave this fucking sink backing up problem. Well, Jack was like, you need to get that fixed because I know somebody that they had some kind of overflow that, like, leaked down into their, person below them's apartment and caused so much damage they got evicted. So he's, like, laying this guilt trip on me, and I'm like, okay, I'll get it fixed, I was hoping it would resolve itself. Like any good lazy American. I was hoping it would resolve itself, but it didn't. In fact, it's gotten worse. Imagine that. I tried to snake it. I Dranoed it. I don't know. I'm not sure what the fuck it's clogged with. I dropped a toothpaste cap down there about, 8 months ago, but it really wasn't a problem until about a month ago. That's when it became, like, a real big deal. So I don't know what the fuck happened. I brush my teeth a lot. I think that might have something to do with it. But it's just disgusting. It's a really gross problem to have, and like it's unresolved. I'm just gonna leave the apartment like by itself for an unknown period of time. I didn't even get to pack or anything. Like if I am gonna do that, I need to like set everything in order before I go. So we watched Titanic. I don't know if I really want to get that into Titanic yet, but the Titanic was supposed to dock a few blocks from here on like, somewhere around 14th Street on the Hudson. Like Pier 54, I think is what it was. So the movie had kind of an odd presence. Immediate presence. The wind and the Atlantic and the water. The very waters that lap the Hudson are the same that the Titanic sunk into. But also rode, and so the vibe, the chill, the Atlantic winds, that Atlantic thing, that North Atlantic thing is very like strong. And New York was where they were coming. And the people that survived fucking landed there. So it's weird. It's kind of eerie, to think this was a real fucking thing. That was the big difference between seeing it as a child versus seeing it as an adult. Was just that it just feels a lot more real. You kind of, the terror of it in the extreme human experience that would be. That is not a normal thing. If that's how your life ends, that would be horrific and tragic and traumatic. And just the absolute helplessness of it. It is like a fever dream. It's like a terror dream. A lot of movies, I feel like, are anxiety dreams. Like falling off of a cliff or something. How you think you're going to fall in bed. The Titanic is one of those situations where it's just like, what if the fucking ground beneath you just disappeared? And you were left in this incredibly painful, deadly, they had nowhere to, there was no way out. Just the absolute, like, hysteria that would cause. And the bedlam. What, just like, what was that like? It happened in 2 hours. That period of time from when they hit the iceberg to when the fucking thing sank, that had to have just been so goddamn bizarre and crazy. Like I couldn't, just all of the fucking human experience packed into those 2 hours. It's hard to fathom. No pun intended, what that would be like. And just all the stories of it. I mean, it's just that it is like kind of one of the epitomizing myths of our modern machine and the hubris of kind of our belief in our own power and our own invincibility, and how nature can just kind of like make short work of that. The Titanic was the biggest thing ever created, They say it in the movie. J. Bruce Ismay, the coward, does. But there's just a lot of that, I think the survivors were put up at like the Jane Hotel. It wasn't the Jane Hotel at that time. I'm not sure if it was the Jane, but it was one of these fucking maritime kind of hotels. The whole west side is a port, Manhattan is what it is because it's one of the most unique natural harbors in the world. It's got a deep bottom and this kind of bedrock underneath the landmass. They don't use it anymore for that. So it's hard to picture what the fuck would it look like to have the Titanic dock right here. It's like Ghostbusters 2. The Titanic just arrived. Holy shit. That's one of the most vivid parts of that movie. And it happened right here. It's fucking crazy. That Ghostbusters 2 happened right here. But watching this disaster movie was sort of unknowingly prescient. I think studying these disasters is one way of sort of like... It's an apocalypse fantasy. Really. It was made around the same time as Armageddon and Deep Impact, and it has the same kind of like... a lot of the kind of same CGI thrills. It's almost like one of those rides at Universal Studios. The fucking hull turning up and then them riding it down. That's almost like a building coming down in Armageddon. Or ID4, Independence Day. It was around the same time. And the love story and the historical kind of like narrative, the romantic part of it is, unfortunately... takes a detour into the Davy Jones locker unexpectedly. What a bummer. What a fucking buzzkill, man. That would be so goddamn traumatic. I'm surprised that Rose has this, like, affection, and she holds it. After all those years, it's been 100 fucking years. Like, it was one night for him. He's a fuckboy. He's a pickup artist. Look at all these chicks. He's showing you pictures of them, man. That's how he seduces you? By showing you naked pictures that he drew of other women? Like, it's so obvious he's a fuckboy. It just, he went too far. He took it too far. I mean, he had to do it. That's why he's a true fuckboy. He's a true gentleman. That's not to say fuckboys are not gentlemen. I think they should be. Let's train the fuckboys to be gentlemen. Rather than vilify them, give them better skills. Help them realize themselves. Make the fact that we're being exploited, more hidden to us. I don't know. I talked about Titanic so much with Eamon, and I feel like we're rehashing a lot of... Well, he's a real Titanic scholar. He's got a lot of smart things to say about it. I was listening to Bob Dylan's 14-minute Fantasia on the Titanic Tempest, which... honestly, I had never listened to before. I'm a big fan of the Tempest album, but I think I burned it on my computer or something, and I just left the Titanic song off. Because I'm like, I don't know. There was just some reason I was just like, there's no way I'm going to get into this. This is like 14 minutes. I don't know. There was just something that just hit wrong. Sort of like, that album Together Through Life. I never really got into that album that much either. Like, maybe at some point I'll revisit it and be like, oh, this is better. Like, this Titanic song is really a masterpiece. I didn't realize what I was missing. It's an incredible piece of work. In some ways, it's kind of a precursor to Murder Most Foul. But it has echoes of a lot of, a lot of Dylan albums classically end with, like, this long, kind of epic poem, like Desolation Row, Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, what else? Highlands is one of the albums. A lot of his albums have like a fucking 12-minute long It's just like verse, 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 verse. That's like the last song. I'm trying to think of some other ones. There's got to be more. But like in the last, like Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands takes up an entire side of the disc. It's side 4. Because it's like 16 minutes fucking long or something. Murder Most Foul is another one. You know, Rough and Rowdy Ways. It's the last song. I think it's actually Bob Dylan's longest song, Murder Most Foul. Which is incredible because it went number 1. But he has a history of doing this. So, like, the Titanic song, Tempest, I'm pretty sure is the last song on the album. I always thought that song about John Lennon was, because I didn't even put, like I said, I just didn't burn the fucking Titanic song, because I was like, there's no way I'm going to listen to this. I think I may have heard that Leonardo DiCaprio was mentioned in the song and just sort of been like, okay. This is Bob just being kind of nutty. Like his Christmas album's kind of like that too, where it's just like, this is kind of like he's trolling people a little bit. But I don't think he does troll people. I actually think everything he does, he's able to make it artistically have integrity. Like even when he mentions, I'll take Brando, Godfather, and Pacino, Scarface, or whatever. When, you know, his last album made a lot of like really dumb pop culture references, but to be fair, he's always done that. Those British bad boys, the Rolling Stones, you know, or Alicia Keys. He mentions Alicia Keys on Modern Times. That's, you know, so he has a history of, but even in his early songs, his songs are filled with characters. You know, what's that song? And he has a lot of songs about ships. Senor, Tales of Yankee Power. What's the one about the Mayflower? Whatever the fuck that one's. It's just like all these characters. Ahab and this fucking person. He can pull from anywhere. You know, Desolation Row, it's T.S. Eliot. You know, does he mention Cleopatra in the song? There's a lot. Ezra Pound is in the fucking song. There's a lot of fucking characters from everywhere, but he sort of fictionalizes them and mythologizes them by putting them in this sort of like ghost ship, which the Titanic is, which all of these songs are in a way. They're all kind of loaded. This Titanic song, it's sort of dreamlike, you know. It's obviously sort of the real Titanic, but there's things about it that aren't factual, and it's not really, doesn't care about that. It talks about Leo and Rose. Talks about Leo and Cleo. It talks about the captain. It talks about the brothel keeper. It's sort of like Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts. It has this this kind of majestic grandeur, and it feels like a ship song. It feels like it feels like a 19th century ballad or something. It's weird because the song feels like it was written before the Titanic. It feels like it's from the fucking Civil War era or something. Like it has this kind of maritime not shanty, but like it's got that, like Bob Dylan is really familiar with that tradition and that rhythm, and it definitely, this song is just verse after verse after verse after verse of just like scenes from. Once again, it's a metaphor for the apocalypse. He mentions the book of Revelations and the sky opening up and eternity and all these, you know, kind of the universe, people tumbling, the ship splitting in half. It's like the movie. It's fascinated by the wreck itself. I listened to that song, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, recently, which is sort of like the classic, not Bob Dylan song about like a shipwreck. Joey's not the last song on Desire. I think Sarah is. I think Sarah's the last song. I also listened to Tim Heidecker's Titanic. His 15-minute Titanic song. He heard Bob Dylan was putting out. I remember hearing about this at the time. I remember reading about it. Tim Heidecker read that Bob Dylan was putting out a 14-minute long song about the Titanic, and he quickly wrote one and recorded it to beat Bob Dylan to the punch. And so I listened to that. uh, today as well. It is, it's not as good. You may not be surprised to learn. It's funny. It's sort of like, it's like a genre kind of rehash parody of Sarah. It's basically the song Sarah. The melody is pretty much lifted from that. But also with aspects of like the song Senor, Tales of Yankee Power, and I don't know, like that whole Desire era, that Joey song. It feels like it's got the violin and the kind of Scarlett Rivera thing. But he does a couple things that Bob Dylan also does, and I'm not sure if that's because he knew anything specific about the song before it came out, or if he heard it. I don't think he heard it before it came out, but they both start in the same place. Tim Heidecker's song starts about how the Titanic left on April 10th. 'Twas the day of April 10th or some shit. And Bob Dylan's song says something about the night of April 12th, I think, is when it actually went down. Or was it the 14th? I think it was the 12th. It's when it went down. Or was it the 15th? I think it hit it on the 14th and sank the 15th. Because they were almost, they were more than halfway across. And, Tim Heidecker's song is a genre parody of Bob Dylan. He does like a Bob Dylan voice, where Bob Dylan's song, like a lot of his sort of late career stuff, he's playing with this sort of genre of Americana, or, I don't know, just peculiar eras. He's able to perform in a style and appropriate sort of the trappings of acoustic folk music or American music from like the 19th century. Like that song Mother of Muses has that feel from Rough and Rowdy Ways. It just feels like something from this like Mark Twain or like 19th century like phrenology, era of like intellectual or cerebral. It feels like some kind of like Sir Isaac Newton song or something. It has this kind of like chamber music quality. The Titanic song feels more like you can definitely feel the sea and the kind of, it sounds like almost like music from like the Civil War era or Stephen Foster or something. But it has that kind of ballad clearly. It's just a lot of verses. It's like The Ship. The Ship is famously Titanic. It's the biggest fucking thing ever made. And it's just loaded with all these people, rich, poor, good, bad, the crew. Bob Dylan, he doesn't actually talk about it, that many people from the real thing. He doesn't mention the unsinkable Molly Brown. It's not a documentary song that much. He mentions specific things about the boat itself. That's kind of more what it's about. It's about kind of establishing just like the scene of this wreck and just like the awesome fucking... It almost feels like some kind of commemorative tin to the Titanic that you found. That was, that came out in like 1912. Like this song sounds like that era, which to be honest is not easy to do. It sounds authentic from that era. Almost no other major rock artist can do that. Like Bob Dylan is about the only one that can play with those kind of styles. Like the Beatles and McCartney do a little bit of like music hall type shit. But like this song sounds like it's from, like I said, like the fucking early 1900s or something. Like it sounds like you're wearing a fucking boater hat. Or like seersucker, or you're on a fucking paddle wheel boat or something. I've been thinking a lot about how the Beatles are from Liverpool, and like McCartney has a lot of kind of like, well, just the importance of sailing to the British Empire. It's a tiny ass country in the northern fucking fucked off corner of everything, and they took over the whole world because of sailing. The sun never sets on the British Empire. They had imperialist colonies. They invented the shit. Well, they didn't invent it, but like they maxed it out in a lot of ways. They were precursors to the United States in that way. In the same way that the United States has military bases every fucking place. The British in Liverpool is a huge port. The Titanic was, well, White Star Line I think was originally in Liverpool. Even though the Titanic sailed out of Southampton, I think it was like registered in Liverpool or something. They built it in Ireland. They built it in Belfast. So that's why the movie has all this fucking like Irish flute in it and shit. Which I think is appropriate. It sounds like the jet stream. It sounds like the wind kind of over the Atlantic to me. And that kind of ghost mist. The icebergs. I think the movie does get the poetry of the story. It's a melodrama, and it is opera. You know, it is operatic. The violence and the apocalyptic, just like the song is really after that. The kind of swirl of just like the chaos of the world being upended, the furniture going fucking, rolling and tumbling, the dishes fucking shattering, the glass. All some of the richest people in the world were on the Titanic. John Jacob Astor, Guggenheim, the people who started Macy's, the Duncan. They fucking died. How fucking, well, it's very apropos to our current day, right? Because it is this story about class. The fucking people under the boat didn't even get to, they just drowned. They got locked into the fucking icy waters. And just man's arrogance and pioneering this new kind of like luxury fucking travel. It's almost like Bezos' space thing. We're going to go to fucking Mars. We're going to send rich people to space. When's the fucking, what's the Titanic of space gonna be? Like, and the exaggerated difference between the kind of wealthy and the poor. The steerage people kept below their trash, and the fucking, the Titanic is like this luxury ass. There's a grand staircase and fucking tennis courts. And, I mean, it's basically a cruise ship. That's what I don't get, is it's like, I imagine a lot of today's cruise ships are comparable, if not bigger than the fucking Titanic. And yet we look at those like they're just like the scuzziest. I mean, I would love to take a ship across the ocean, actually. I would totally do that. I mean, I've never really been on a long sea journey. Maybe I get motion sickness. That wouldn't be good. But, like, I think the idea of taking, like, a couple weeks... I mean, how dangerous is it? The Titanic is one of those stories where it's just, like... It's kind of a perfect disaster. Like... It was like, not like it was a 1 in a million thing unlikely, but just like, it was just like a series of just like, just dumb kind of miscalculations and just like, it's not unlike the pandemic, they thought, oh, we don't need these fucking light boats. This thing's unsinkable. You have to flood 5 compartments, it's impossible. Never happened. And it did. And they only had half as many lifeboats, which... That's because they didn't take it seriously. They didn't think that there was any risk. And It's an epic fail. And tragic. That was the problem Jack had with the movie. And I think that was the problem I had when I first saw it. When I first saw it, I haven't seen it since. We saw it in the theater in 1997, Christmas. It was what we did. We went and fucking saw Titanic. For some reason, it's a Christmas movie. I guess because it's cold. It's sort of like a consumer. I mean, I think it was manufacturing like sexual desire for Leonardo DiCaprio, basically, and every woman on Earth, and it worked. It's a Disney movie. It's impressive because it's live action, but the way the characters kind of like interact in the roles they play are basically lifted from Disney stuff. It's like he's like an Aladdin kind of rakish. She's basically a princess. Billy Zane's basically like some kind of fucking villain guy, rich. But it's I don't know. The tenor of the Titanic it's not the same thing as like Romeo and Juliet. The Titanic thing is like grim in a way that's like it's real. It's a historical thing. And so choosing to graft this love story onto this, it would be, in some ways, it would be like grafting a love story onto like a 9/11 movie. They're sort of comparable events in certain ways. Huge things going down. The engineering, the steel, the Titanic is basically a building. It's a skyscraper. It was built around the same time as the first skyscrapers using similar technologies. And it went vertical and down just like the fucking World Trade Center. And, so to use that, I don't find the love story like particularly tragic because I mean it's an accident. Like with Romeo and Juliet, it's like the animosity is like these two families, which is sort of like this metaphor for just like there's pointless disputes and divisions everywhere in society, that kind of universalizes that. I mean, the Titanic going down, it's not a similar thing to like overcome. It's just kind of this gross, the whole movie is just like going down. You know what's going to happen, like. And so to use the visuals of like all these people as like they're fucking ice cubes floating in the North Atlantic and fucking little CGI, like people like flipping off the propeller and shit, like that's kind of pornographic. It's exploitative, definitely. I didn't have a problem with it. To me, it is like the movie is clearly like meant to be. It is what it is. It's not the greatest. It's kind of hokey. It's kind of lowest common denominator. It's lowest common denominator in just the right ways to make it so broadly appealing that it can have universal. It's sort of beyond. It's sort of international because the characters are vague and cliches or archetypes, if you want to think that way. To me, they're not really archetypes because they're not really that well defined. They're just vague. It's like he's a fucking cliche. He's this rogue gambler artist guy who picks up chicks, and she's like wealthy girl that wants. It's like those are cliches. They're not really archetypes to me. And the dialogue is fucking... the dialogue is corny in a way that I actually think probably works everywhere. Like, that kind of dialogue, I don't know, it's pithy, so it gets through. It's like comic book dialogue. It's smart aleck, but it's iconic. You know, there are some really... the movie is, like, incredibly well put together. I think it's impressive, actually. It's like The Boat. It's 3 hours long, just like Titanic. It's big, is the point, you know. But the CGI, I will say, is good in it. I would say that's one of the better uses of CGI I've ever seen, because you don't notice it. It's not grotesque. If they would have made it 10 years later, it would have been horrific. They would have CGI'd everything. James Cameron built models for the most part, and then the CGI is naturalistic. They try to hide it. It's not like they just went nuts and used their imaginations for whatever they wanted. The light is really good in that movie. The golden kind of light. You can tell he loves the ship, and the ship kind of inspires that kind of... Boats do that. They inspire this, like, oh, she's a real beaut. She's a beautiful, you know, like... And it's a sad story. It really is. Even though, you know, it's an example of arrogance, or I don't know, that's one way to read it. It's just like, it's sad, man. Like, even if those people were rich or whatever, like, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, you know? Like, that would be just like a really, 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 you know, hearing about disasters or hearing about, you know, living through what we're living through, it's just like you just realize how lucky it is to live to old age and to die of natural causes. You know, dying of a violent death or a painful death, like, I mean, Titanic, what he says at the beginning of the movie, you know, the water's so cold, as soon as you hit it, it feels like 1,000 knives are stabbing you. He says that at the beginning of the movie when she's going to jump off. Well, think about that. Everybody at the end of the movie is in the fucking water. So, they're all feeling like 1,000 knives are stabbing them. That's how they die. Like, that's sad, man. Nobody deserves that. Especially Leo. I think it's funny that, well, in Tempest, the Bob Dylan song, he doesn't say Jack. He doesn't say Jack took his sketchbook. He says Leo. So, you know, he's not necessarily referring to the movie. Even though if he was referring to the movie, he'd say Jack took his sketchbook. But he is also referring to the movie. He's referring to the movie star in sort of a cheeky way, in sort of a funny way. Leo took his sketchbook. But at the same time, it isn't him. It's not Leo, it's some other Leo with a sketchbook. And it's some other Rose. The song plays like that on a lot of levels, you know. It's like it reminded me of Lily Rosemary and the Jack of Hearts. It has that kind of like parlor feel, like I said, those kind of characters. Diamond Jim Brady and William Zanzinger is another one. Bob's able to tap into those kind of characters and things in a way that, you know, to be honest, not a lot of artists do. For Bob to be as like dignified of a master as he is, if you look at the materials and the image, you know, his image is as this sort of Woody Guthrie, like hobo, like poet with a guitar, like Dust Bowl or something. That's kind of an unexpected place for somebody. You know, he came out of folk music. It's an unexpected place for somebody so important to popular culture and an artist of such magnitude and grace and intricacy to come from. Maybe it's not unexpected, maybe it's perfectly logical, but like these ballads, this folk music, that's such a rich tradition and it's such a literary tradition. It's very much a part of the canon of poetry or literature. It's a companion to that. I mean, I think we probably look at it in a way that's maybe not as, like, elitist or something, putting it on a pedestal necessarily. But Bob is like, he's an interesting example of somebody who kind of works at the top of the register. What is it? What's the Zukofsky thing about speech and music or whatever? Low end speech, high end music, or something, you know. Like, Bob is doing the same thing that poets do. It's just he does it in the flow of kind of rhythm, of sound, of music, melody. But he is a lyricist, primarily. I mean, the Titanic song, the melody, there's no chorus. It's just, the melody is so, I don't know where he got it from. Maybe it's from another song. But it perfectly captures the time period, the longing, the romance, like I said, the majesty, the sadness. It's clearly like a sea song. It's clearly in that tradition. You can tell. The Tim Heidecker song is more, like I said, it's more just like this kind of pastiche of various, like the Ruddles or something, you know. It's a parody of Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan's song is, it's not really a parody, but it's sort of a parody of some kind of like 1910 song about the Titanic. Even though the Titanic happened 2 years later. I think for it's a love story about Jack and Rose, but it's also a love story about the boat. The boat itself is this kind of charismatic, like the Empire State Building. It's iconic. And it's sad, the boat's at the bottom of the ocean, man. Like, that's unbelievable. 10,000 feet. It's interesting to think about what it means to, what happens to your body after you die. And does it matter? A lot of people believe it does. You know, the Buddhists are very specific about what needs to happen when a body expires, and you do need to perform all these different, John Giorno talks about, you need to perform all these different things to make sure that the soul gets where it needs to go. It's a very important moment when you die, and you do need to perform these rituals, or else the soul will be punished or lose its way in the afterlife. I mean, that's pretty fucking serious. So what happens to you if you get dismembered, or at the bottom of the ocean, you die traumatically in a shipwreck, violently, prematurely? Does that have repercussions in the afterlife? What does it mean to come to rest at the bottom of the ocean? And the shipwrecks down there. I mean, I think the movie is good in the way that it sort of like triangulates being an action movie and a disaster movie, sort of a documentary. I mean, James Cameron actually did all that shit. He actually went to the fucking Titanic. He built a submarine himself, of course. He, you know, that's what he does. And he went down there. And, So the movie is in part like an actual documentary. Well, the historical, I think one of the prime values of it is the visualizations of the boat are so strong. You know, they really, I think, did a lot of research to be faithful to the way it actually looked. And so, even if you don't give a fuck about the characters or the love story, if you're a guy and that shit drives you nuts, it's still kind of, well, it's interesting to see a disaster movie, right? But also just to see the boat, the power of the boat, the historical detail. There's some real characters in the movie. I wouldn't say it's like the best movie about that. It's not that concerned with that. Like the Bob Dylan song, it's not. It's a poem. It's Titanic. I think the name it's like giant, you know, the James Dean movie. It sort of describes itself. Titanic. I think it's appropriate that it's the #1 movie of all time. It's a nice thing for the memory of the ship, in that it's like sentimentalized in our culture in that way. I think that's sweet. But I think it's oddly fitting. Hollywood and the #1 movie of all time would be this, about this boat. It's a glamorous, but it's also, it's so tragic, and it's so doomed love. I mean, why is it? The #1 movies, you know, it's Gone with the Wind and it's Titanic, and they're similar. They're love stories set against these these backdrops of like historical. They're burning Atlanta, the fall of the South. Titanic is the ship going down. Somehow that contrasts, or James Cameron said he thought the love story was the best way to get the audience to emotionally feel like the emotional truth of losing the Titanic. I think that's kind of the most interesting part of the movie to me, is how he kind of laces in the kind of poetry of the sea, like the necklace, the heart of the ocean. It's this blue heart diamond with like kind of this sea foam crystal band or whatever. And then there's like a cut or something to the chandelier, like tinkling, crinkling. And it's like I don't know, he really gets something about that atmosphere. He puts that across visually. The white light in the chandelier, and the chandelier tinkling is like ice. Like, I think the movie does kind of put across a little bit that the romance of the voyage and the whole, that era. And the sea, you know, just like the life of the sea or something. I mean, just like there are so many iconic moments in that movie. It's nuts. Like, them on the fucking bow of the ship with her spreading her arms out. The I'm the king of the world thing. I'd like to see A Night to Remember again. We watched that in 6th grade. We did a unit on the Titanic. I was obsessed with it for like a month or 6 weeks or whatever. I did, a big poster board where I drew the fucking staircase and shit. That was my report on the Titanic. I loved it. I was obsessed with it, man. I was checking out books from the library about it, reading everything I could about the fucking Titanic. This was before the movie came out. This was 96. We talked in class about, they're supposed to make this movie about Titanic, huh? Wonder what that'll be about. And, Bob Dylan's song, Broken Backs and Broken Necks. He's fascinated by that part of it. He paints this, in his song, he uses the visual of like the illuminated dark, he's constantly like contrasting the darkness of the night and like the stars, the brightness at the same time. They gambled in the dark, which was the mood at the time. The iceberg, the moon, the stars, that's the only thing you'd see out there. And just like of the moment, of sort of the galactic moment of the end, the sort of darkness of space mixed with the kind of, phosphorescent or whatever of the light, the stars, and the presence of both of those at the same time, like black metal or something, Swedish. It's all these Nordic countries that have the black metal, where it's daylight 24 hours a day. That's where it's darkest. Born in a red hook of Brooklyn, in the year of a who knows when. So there goes my frankly fabulous holiday spectacular. God damn it. Well, for me, so I'll get back to talking about the pandemic. That feels like probably important. For me, it's just like back to outdoor performing again, I never left. I wish, knowing now what I know, what I probably should have been doing is performing indoors from June until November. I did the opposite. I've basically performed pretty much exclusively outdoors. I've done some open mics inside, I guess. That open mic at KGB and the KGB, but like mostly outdoors. I did my tour. I did my New York City tour. Because the weather was nice, and I was trying to be protective about COVID, to be honest. I wasn't really trying to be indoors that much. I wasn't going out. I'd go out on dates, but I wasn't really seeing people hardly, and I wasn't going to bars with full of people for that long of time because I was trying to be safe about fucking coronavirus. Let me move the camera real fast. So that shows how I knew that would happen. Fucker. Oh shit, what happened? serious? Come on, bitch. Motherfucker. You piece of shit. Fucking piece of shit. Okay, I gotta start it over.